The Propagation of the Gospel. 15. The Epistle to the Galatians. After writing the second epistle to the Corinthians, Paul tarried for some time longer in Macedonia, but not wishing to hasten his journey to Corinth, in the then condition of the church there, he appears to have spent some time in the regions north of Greece, visiting new fields, establishing churches where none had been founded before. It is likely that it was at this time that he extended his apostolic labors around about into Illyricum, according to the allusion in Romans 15:19. We have no account of this in the history contained in the book of the Acts, but we are to remember that this does not profess to give a complete history, and that there are many labors and experiences of Paul alluded to in his epistles, which there is no reference in the narrative of Luke. Now, the book of Acts may be after some other books that weren't included, so it could have been a Bible of its own, right? How long he continued in this region, we do not know, but evidently not a very long time. When matters were in a suitable state, he made his contemplated visit to Corinth, where he remained about 3 months. It was during this time that, according to some of the best authorities, the epistle to the Galatians was written. There are others who place it earlier, namely before his departure from Ephesus, and some, though on quite insufficient grounds, place it still earlier, making it the first of his epistles to the churches. Galatia was a region in the central part of Asia Minor. It was a rough mountainous region and contained no large towns or cities. It was inhabited by a simple, hardy race of men who had come to this territory from the northern part of Greece, but whose ancestors had immigrated some ages previously from Germany. As the name implies, they were evidently of the Gallic stock and related to the Gauls and Celts of Western Europe, whom also they resembled in many respects, both in character and in certain elements of their language. But in terms of language, you can't say, well, this sounds like a word in the nearby language. Sometimes there's a twist going one way or the other. So when they talk about, like, Zarathustra turning all the gods of the Hindus into demons and stuff like this, it was something inherent in the language before he was around. And names of God, perhaps, but he was a monotheist, so you understand. It's like, if you're saying that there's a God of this, that, and the other, any monotheist is going to say, well, either you're just personifying names of God, or you're referring to demons, or you're referring to something about your imagination. Like a lot of people, they just come up with some linguistic thing that, and there must be a God of this, or goddess, or that sort of thing. It was among the scattered villages and hamlets of this region that Paul had gone preaching the gospel during his second missionary journey. And just add Al, L, R, Ia, or Yah, or something like that at the end, and then he turned into an angel name too. But we have no details of this work and no account of the particular churches gathered, except what is implied in this epistle. The epistle itself differs from all others of Paul's epistles to the churches, and that is addressed not to a particular church, but to the churches, a group of churches in Galatia. The occasion of the communication appears to have been this. After Paul had left this people, certain of the Judaizing teachers came among them, endeavoring to modify the doctrine which Paul uniformly proclaimed to the Gentile converts concerning their relation to the Mosaic dispensation. This was substantially that it was unnecessary for them to obey the ceremonial law. This had been only preparatory to the coming of Christ, and was not intended by itself to be a means of salvation, and that to trust in it after the coming of Christ, to lead to whom was its sole use, was to make Christ of no avail. While he did not object to the present observance of the then ceremony by the Jews, who had been brought up in them, while he himself observed them, he evidently anticipated the time when they would be regarded as of no account by both Jews and Gentiles. Now, liberal Jews who don't believe in or otherwise don't want to, or for some other reason don't want to be observant, much less religious, that's, but Jesus, plahrose, he came to refurbish the law, not to do away with one jot or tittle. And there's other verses that one could apply, but, one is enough to kind of indicate that he was not this antinomial figure. What he was against the conservative add-ons, the conservative takeaways, hence the refurbishing. And fulfillment does not mean that, we admit it, so therefore we can destroy it, But the more rigid of the Jewish converts, aided doubtless by emissaries from abroad, antagonized Paul in this respect, as we have seen, formed a party hostile to them, and they went so far to cherish a prejudice against him, and he belittled his authority and cast suspicion upon his apostleship, and some of the more bitter partisans to malign his character. I don't know if you can call this prejudice if you're looking at someone's behavior and the professed belief, and they're obvious not taking the, I'm really of the, I'm more purely of the same path that you were supposed to be on. It's like, but you're saying to reject it at its core, so different guesses, or at the very least, are going to be made about why is he doing this. We have had an account of the opposition at Corinth, which was partially incited by this party. In Galatia, the emissaries of this sect had scattered the seeds of doubt and dissension among a warm-hearted, simple-minded, and impulsive people. Trying to label the Jews as if they're inferior in intelligence. Paul evidently was very tenderly attached to them and was overwhelmed with distress at the mischief that had been wrought among them. This letter was written to remonstrate with them and to endeavor to correct their false notions. It is energetic, direct, and unsparing, but at the same time tenderly affectionate. He finds it necessary not only to correct the views which had been imposed upon them, but also to vindicate himself from the aspirations cast upon his office and teaching. Now, by the time this goes public, I certainly hope things would get better, but this systemic and gender politics, all this stuff, look at, you're in a position to do what you're supposed to do. Now, there is injustice, address injustice, don't blame everybody that's really part of the system and see it's your, that's what you're doing when you're saying this stuff is systemic. But the views, are they views that you made up yourself? Are they views that have been imposed on you by society? You need to go a bit beyond that. I mean, you still do your right to yourself and your right to the outer creation, but don't let either trample on your rights. Nero was the emperor in 54 to 68 of the Common Era. Date of the epistle was 56 or 57. What was the situation of Galatia and the origin and character of the Galatians? How does this epistle differ from others in this address? 1, 2, where do we find the account of Paul's first visit to this region? What was the particular occasion of this communication? Have we seen any hostility of Paul to similar character elsewhere? Introduction to the epistles to Corinthians. What were some of the intimations concerning Paul? What allusions to this epistle 1, 7, 2, 4, 3, 1, 4, 17, 6, 12, and 13. What feeling was excited against the apostle? How does he vindicate his apostleship? 1, 1, 2, 12. What narrative does he give in support of this? Verses 13 through 24. What particular event subsequent to his conversion does he give, not elsewhere found? Verse 17. What confirmation of his divine call did the church at Jerusalem and the apostles give him? 2, 1 through 10. Had there been any opposition to him at this time? Verse 3 and 4. What influence had these opponents afterwards on Peter at Antioch? And what was the effect on the relations of the two apostles? Verses 11 through 14. Is it probable that there was any permanent estrangement? 2 Peter 3:15. What evidences have we of the warm-heartedness of the Galatians and the affectionate relations existing between Paul and them? 4:13, 14, and 15, 19 and 20. After 4 verses 13, 14, 15, 19, and 20 is 4. Was it their personal estrangement that pained him or something else? 1, 6, and 8, 3, and 1. What was the position taken by Paul concerning the relations of converted Gentiles to the Jews or Mosaic law? What was the position taken by his opponents? What was the main question discussed in chapters 3 and 4? Under Jewish dispensation, what was deemed necessary to salvation? Under the Christian law, what? Chapter 3, verse 2. And I think we can reason out that the Ha-Kohanim, enemies of the prophets, the rabbis and the Cohens, that's why so many prophets kept coming, because they were kept trying to change the path. So if the path of these, the professional priest and the state kind of differed from that of the prophets, well, let's look beyond the state or the ethnic way and what the prophets actually said. And if Paul's reasoning out Christianity, and we're not quite directly referring to Jesus and anything that Paul has to say, as far as what Jesus would have taught, what is meant here by the law? Could the law really save anyone? Matthew 7, verse 21. Was Abraham or any of the good men anterior to him considered righteous because of their relation to the law? Why? 3:6. Also verses 15 through 17. Is the faith that saves simply believing the truth about a person? Does it imply any purpose and determination? And if so, what? What then was the design of the law? Verses 23, 24, and 25. How did a godly man under the law differ from one under faith? For verse 1, 3, and 7. What allegorical illustration does he give? 21 through 31. What is the condition of the man of faith as distinguished from the man under the law? Well, the man under the law has an internal thing. So something happens to his health or something like this, he doesn't have the mesolimbic thing, and the mesocortical thing kind of gets overridden and who knows what. What argument is made concerning the uselessness of the sacrifice and atonement of Christ if men could be saved by obedience to the law? What is the great essential thing in religion? Verse 6, see also 4:15. What caution is given concerning the use of liberty? Verse 13. What is the one great key word of the religion of Christ? Well, the religion of Paul's religion, but Paul's religion about Christ, or a Christ. Verse 14, is it good doctrine that if we have the right belief in the way to live is of little consequence? If men do not discipline their carnal impulses, what effects will ensue? 19 through 21. What will the discipline of a soul merely trusting in Christ lead to? 22 through 24. Do you notice the difference in the number of virtues and that of vice? What is the general rule for our treatment of one another? Verse 26. What, in case of a brother's fault? Chapter 6, 1. What particular rules of mutual spiritual relationship? Verses 2 through 6 and 10. What important doctrines as well as practical philosophy as a spiritual and moral conduct? 7 and 8. So 117 and is it 22 through 24? Well, in Galatians 5 anyways, the virtues and the vices lists are probably, if you could take anything from these books, we'd probably turn to chapter 5 and chapter 1, verse 17, and learn at least the message, if not the exact words of that. But Galatians 5 really condemns these unrighteous sinner Christians, saying, oh, no. It's, you got to be good people. You got to show that you're saved now.